There was a girl in the back of the classroom that nobody ever noticed. Her name was Lena, and she was 12 years old. She always sat in the last row near the window, where she could look outside without anyone seeing her face. She wore the same gray hoodie almost every day. It was too big for her, and the sleeves were starting to get holes near the wrists. But it was warm, and it made her feel invisible. And most days, invisible was exactly what she wanted to be. Lena and her family had moved to America from the Philippines when she was 7. Her father worked as a janitor at a hospital. He left the house before the sun came up and came back after it went down. Her mother cleaned houses for rich families on the other side of town. Sometimes she brought home food that those families were going to throw away. Lena never complained. She knew her parents were doing everything they could. They lived in a small apartment with thin walls. The neighbors argued a lot, and the heating never worked properly in the winter. But her parents always made sure she had food to eat and clothes to wear, even if those clothes came from donation bins at the church down the street. School was hard for Lena, not because she was bad at learning. Actually, she was smart, really smart. But she was quiet. Too quiet. She never raised her hand in class, even when she knew the answer. She never talked to other kids during lunch. She just sat alone, eating her sandwich, watching everyone else laugh and talk like it was the easiest thing in the world. The other students didn't bully her exactly. They just acted like she didn't exist, and sometimes that felt even worse. But there was one place where Lena felt like she mattered, one place where she wasn't invisible. It was the basement of the old church 3 blocks from her apartment. Every evening after her homework was done, she would walk there alone. The church was mostly empty at night, but there was a janitor named Mr. Garcia who worked there. He was an old man with kind eyes and slow hands. He had seen Lena sneaking into the basement one night, and instead of telling her to leave, he just nodded and let her be. In that basement, hidden under a dusty sheet, was an old piano. It wasn't a beautiful piano. Some of the keys were chipped. One of the pedals squeaked. But when Lena sat down in front of it, something magical happened. She stopped being the invisible girl. She stopped being the poor kid with the old hoodie. She became someone else. Someone powerful. Someone with a voice. She had taught herself to play. She didn't have money for lessons. She didn't have a teacher. All she had was a cracked phone with a slow internet connection and hundreds of YouTube videos. She watched them over and over again, pausing and rewinding, studying the way the pianists moved their fingers. Then she would try it herself, again and again, until her hands ached and her eyes burned from tiredness. 4 years. That's how long she had been doing this. 4 years of secret practice, hidden from everyone. Not even her parents knew. They thought she went to the church to help Mr. Garcia clean. She never told them the truth because she was scared. Scared they would laugh. Scared they would tell her to stop dreaming and focus on something real. But the music was real to her. It was the most real thing in her life. At school, there was a music teacher named Mrs. Thornton. She was tall and always wore bright red lipstick and clicked her heels loudly when she walked down the hallway. She had been a music teacher for over 20 years, and she believed she could spot talent from a mile away. She was proud of that, maybe too proud. Mrs. Thornton had her favorite students, the ones with nice clothes and confident smiles, the ones whose parents donated money to the school and came to every concert with flowers and cameras. She gave those students extra attention, extra time, extra praise. She never looked at Lena, not once. One Tuesday morning, Mrs. Thornton made an announcement in class. The school was holding its annual spring talent show. It was a big deal. Parents would come. Local news might even show up. And the winner would get a small scholarship for summer arts camp. The classroom buzzed with excitement. Kids started whispering to each other about what they were going to perform. Singing, dancing, magic tricks. One boy said he was going to do stand-up comedy. Lena's heart started beating faster. She thought about the piano in the church basement. She thought about all those nights alone, playing until her fingers went numb. She thought about how it would feel to finally show someone what she could do. But then Mrs. Thornton said something that made her stomach drop. The teacher looked around the room with a tight smile and said that this talent show was for students who had real skills. It wasn't just for fun, it was serious. She said she hoped everyone who signed up actually had something to offer. She didn't want anyone embarrassing themselves on stage. Then her eyes landed on Lena. It was just for a second, but Lena saw it. That look. The look that said, "You don't belong here." Mrs. Thornton moved on, talking about the sign-up sheet on the bulletin board outside her office. But the damage was done. Some of the other students had seen where the teacher was looking. A few of them giggled. One boy whispered something to his friend, and they both laughed. Lena felt her face get hot. She stared at her desk and didn't move for the rest of the class. That night, she didn't go to the church. She just lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about that look. Thinking about all the looks she had gotten her whole life, the looks that said she was poor, that she was nobody, that she would never be anything special. She almost gave up. But then she thought about the piano. She thought about the way the keys felt under her fingers. She thought about the music that came out of her when nobody was watching. The beautiful, powerful, heartbreaking music that she had taught herself to play, note by note, alone in a cold basement. And something inside her changed. She wasn't angry. She wasn't sad. She was determined. Tomorrow, she was going to walk up to that bulletin board. She was going to pick up the pen, and she was going to write her name on that sign-up sheet. Let them laugh. Let them stare. Let them think she was nobody. She would show them all. She had a secret that nobody knew. A gift that nobody had ever seen. And soon, very soon, the whole world was going to find out what the quiet girl in the back of the classroom could really do. Lena closed her eyes and smiled for the first time in weeks. The talent show was in 1 month. That was all the time she needed. The next morning, Lena woke up before her alarm. She had barely slept. Her mind kept racing all night, thinking about the sign-up sheet, thinking about what she was about to do. Part of her wanted to stay in bed and forget the whole thing. But a bigger part of her, a braver part, pushed her to get up. She got dressed quickly and quietly. Her parents had already left for work. There was a note on the kitchen table from her mother, written in her careful handwriting. It said there was rice and eggs in the fridge for breakfast. At the bottom, she had drawn a small heart. Lena touched the paper softly and smiled. Her mother always did little things like that, small reminders that she was loved, even when life was hard. Lena ate quickly and grabbed her backpack. She walked to school faster than usual. Her heart was pounding the whole way. She kept telling herself to stay calm, but her hands were shaking by the time she reached the front doors. The hallway was already crowded with students. Lena pushed through them, keeping her head down, until she reached the bulletin board outside the music room. The sign-up sheet was there, pinned right in the center. A few names were already written on it. She recognized some of them. Popular kids, confident kids. The kind of kids who always got picked first for everything. Lena stood there for a long moment, just staring at the paper. The pen was hanging from a string next to the board. All she had to do was pick it up and write her name. That was it. Simple. But it didn't feel simple. It felt like the hardest thing she had ever done. She reached out her hand. Her fingers touched the pen, and then she heard a voice behind her. "What do you think you're doing?" Lena turned around. Mrs. Thornton was standing there, holding a cup of coffee, looking at her with raised eyebrows. A few students had stopped walking and were watching now. "I wanted to sign up," Lena said quietly. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted it to. "For the talent show." Mrs. Thornton tilted her head like she hadn't heard correctly. "You? You want to perform?" Lena nodded. The teacher let out a short laugh. It wasn't a mean laugh exactly, but it wasn't kind either. It was the kind of laugh adults give when they think a child is being silly. "And what exactly would you be performing?" Mrs. Thornton asked. "Piano," Lena said. There was a pause. Mrs. Thornton blinked a few times, then she smiled, but it was a tight smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. "Lena, sweetheart," she said slowly, like she was explaining something to a very young child. "Do you even have a piano at home? Have you ever taken lessons?" "No, but This isn't just for fun," Mrs. Thornton interrupted. "This is a real competition. There will be judges, parents, important people from the community. We need students who can actually perform at a high level." Lena felt her face burning. More students had gathered now. She could feel their eyes on her. Someone whispered something, and a few kids laughed quietly. "I can play," Lena said. Her voice was shaking now. "I've been practicing for a long time." Mrs. Thornton sighed. She looked at the other students watching, then back at Lena. For a moment, Lena thought she might say something kind, something encouraging, but she didn't. "Look," the teacher said, lowering her voice just a little. "I'm not trying to be harsh. I'm trying to protect you. Do you really want to get up on that stage and embarrass yourself in front of the whole school? In front of your parents?" The words hit Lena like a punch to the stomach. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Mrs. Thornton shook her head and started walking away. But before she left, she said one more thing over her shoulder. "Just think about it, okay? Some people are meant to perform, and some people are meant to watch." The hallway went quiet. Lena stood there, frozen, the pen still in her hand. She could feel everyone staring at her, waiting to see what she would do. Waiting for her to walk away in shame. Her eyes burned. Her throat felt tight. Everything inside her screamed to run, to hide, to disappear. But then she thought about her father, working double shifts so she could have a better life. She thought about her mother, scrubbing floors in strangers' houses, always coming home with a smile even when she was exhausted. She thought about Mr. Garcia at the church, who let her play the old piano every night without asking for anything in return. They had never given up, not once, no matter how hard things got, and she wasn't going to give up either. Lena turned back to the bulletin board. Her hand was still shaking, but she gripped the pen tighter. She pressed it to the paper and wrote her name at the very bottom of the list. Her handwriting was messy because her fingers were trembling so much, but it was there. Her name, in black ink. She was signed up. Behind her, she heard a boy say loudly, "This is going to be hilarious." A girl added, "She's going to make a fool of herself." Lena didn't turn around. She just kept walking, down the hallway, past the laughing faces, past the whispers. She walked until she reached the bathroom at the end of the corridor. She pushed open the door, went into the last stall, and locked it behind her. And then she cried. She cried harder than she had cried in a long time, big, heavy sobs that made her whole body shake. She pressed her hand over her mouth so no one would hear. Tears streamed down her face and dripped onto her old gray hoodie. It hurt. All of it. The laughing. The looks. The way Mrs. Thornton had talked to her like she was nothing. Like she was a joke. But somewhere deep inside, beneath all the pain and the fear, there was something else. A tiny spark that refused to go out. She thought about the piano waiting for her in the church basement. She thought about the music that lived inside her fingers. She thought about the hours and hours she had spent teaching herself, alone in the dark, with nobody watching. They didn't know. None of them knew. Mrs. Thornton had never heard her play. Those kids in the hallway had never heard her play. They thought she was nothing because she was quiet, because she was poor, because she didn't look like the kind of person who could do something amazing. But they were wrong. Lena wiped her face with her sleeve. She took a deep breath, then another. Slowly, the tears stopped. The shaking stopped, And in its place came something new, a fire. She was going to prove them all wrong, not with words, not with arguments, but with music. That night, after school, she went straight to the church. Mr. Garcia was sweeping the front steps when she arrived. He looked at her face and could tell something had happened, but he didn't ask questions. He just nodded toward the basement door and said, "It's open." Lena thanked him quietly and went inside, down the stairs, into the cold, dusty basement. She pulled the sheet off the old piano and sat down on the wooden bench. For a moment she just sat there, her hands resting on the keys. The silence wrapped around her like a blanket. Then she started to play. She played for 3 hours straight. She played until her fingers were red and sore. She played until sweat dripped down her forehead. She played the same piece over and over again, trying to make every note perfect. It was Chopin, one of the hardest pieces ever written for piano. A piece that took professional musicians years to master. A piece that most 12-year-olds would never even attempt. But Lena wasn't most 12-year-olds. She had 4 weeks until the talent show. 4 weeks to become better than anyone expected. 4 weeks to turn herself from a nobody into someone they would never forget. She pressed her fingers to the keys again and started from the beginning. This time she didn't cry. This time she smiled. The next 3 weeks were the hardest of Lena's life. Every single day followed the same pattern. She woke up early, went to school, kept her head down, and tried to survive until the final bell rang. Then she walked straight to the church, went down to the basement, and practiced until her body couldn't take it anymore. Some nights she didn't get home until 10 o'clock. Her parents started to worry. Her mother asked her why she was coming back so late, why she looked so tired, why there were marks on her fingers. Lena just smiled and said she was helping Mr. Garcia with extra cleaning at the church. She hated lying to them, but she wasn't ready to tell the truth. Not yet. She wanted to surprise them. She wanted to show them what their daughter could really do. At school, things got worse. Word had spread about the quiet girl who signed up for the talent show, the girl who said she could play piano even though she had never taken a lesson in her life, the girl who Mrs. Thornton had tried to warn. People thought it was funny. They thought she was a joke. One morning, Lena found a piece of paper taped to her locker. Someone had drawn a terrible picture of a stick figure falling off a piano bench. Underneath it were the words, "Good luck, loser." She pulled it off quickly, crumpled it up, and threw it in the trash before anyone could see her reaction. But they saw. They always saw. A group of girls walked by and laughed. One of them said loudly, "I can't wait to watch her fail. It's going to be so embarrassing." Another one added, "Maybe she'll cry on stage. That would be even better." Lena kept walking. She didn't look at them. She didn't say anything. She just held her books tighter against her chest and kept moving forward. In music class, Mrs. Thornton acted like Lena didn't exist. She never called on her. She never looked at her. When she talked about the upcoming talent show, she mentioned all the other performers by name. She talked about how excited she was to see them on stage. She talked about their talents and their hard work. She never mentioned Lena, not once. It was like she had already decided that Lena wasn't worth acknowledging, like she had already written her off as a failure before she even had a chance to perform. But Lena didn't let it break her. Every cruel word, every laugh, every look of doubt just made her practice harder. At the church, Mr. Garcia became her only friend. He never asked what she was doing down in that basement for hours every night. He never asked why she came in looking so sad sometimes. He just made sure the door was unlocked, made sure the old heater in the corner was working, and sometimes left a cup of hot chocolate on the stairs for her to find. One night, about 2 weeks before the show, he came down to the basement while she was playing. Lena stopped immediately, embarrassed. No one had ever heard her play before. Not really. Not like this. But Mr. Garcia just stood there at the bottom of the stairs, his hands in his pockets, listening. She expected him to say something, to tell her she was doing it wrong, to give her advice she didn't ask for. He didn't. He just listened. And when she finally stopped, too nervous to continue, he nodded slowly. "You know," he said quietly, "I've worked in this church for 32 years. I've heard a lot of music in that time. Choirs, organs, wedding songs, funeral hymns." He paused and looked at her with soft eyes. "I've never heard anything like what you just played." Lena didn't know what to say. Her throat felt tight. She looked down at the piano keys, afraid she might cry. "Whatever they're telling you at that school," Mr. Garcia continued, "don't believe it. You have something special, young lady. Don't let anyone take that away from you." He turned and walked back up the stairs without another word. But his words stayed with her. They wrapped around her heart and gave her strength she didn't know she needed. That night she practiced for 4 more hours. The piece she had chosen was called Ballade No. 1 in G minor by Chopin. It was one of the most famous and most difficult pieces ever written for piano. Professional musicians trained for years just to play it correctly. It had fast sections that required fingers to move like lightning. It had slow sections that required deep emotion and perfect control. It had moments of thunder and moments of whisper. It was a story told entirely through music. A story of struggle, of heartbreak, of triumph. Lena had watched videos of famous pianists performing it. She had studied every note, every pause, every breath. She had broken the piece into small sections and practiced each one hundreds of times. When her fingers cramped, she stretched them and kept going. When her back ached from sitting on the hard wooden bench, she ignored it and kept playing. Some nights, she made mistakes and wanted to scream in frustration. Other nights, something magical happened. Her fingers moved on their own, and the music flowed out of her like water from a river. Those were the nights she felt alive. Those were the nights she knew she was meant to do this. 1 week before the talent show, Lena played the entire piece from beginning to end without a single mistake. It took almost 12 minutes. When she finished, she sat in silence, breathing hard, her heart pounding in her chest. She had done it. But she didn't celebrate. She didn't relax. She just started again from the beginning. Because good wasn't enough. She needed to be perfect. She needed to be so good that no one in that auditorium could deny what they were hearing. At school, the whispers continued. People made jokes about her in the hallway. Someone started a rumor that she was going to play chopsticks and pretend it was a real song. Mrs. Thornton told another teacher, loud enough for Lena to hear, that she had tried to warn the girl, but some people just didn't listen. Lena heard all of it. She felt all of it. But she didn't let it stop her. Because she had a secret that nobody knew, a secret that was going to change everything. 3 days before the show, Lena's mother noticed how tired she looked. She sat down next to her on the couch and took her hand gently. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "You've been so distant lately. So quiet." Lena wanted to tell her everything. About the piano, about the talent show, about all the people who laughed at her and said she would fail. But she couldn't. Not yet. "I'm fine, Mama," she said softly. "I promise. Just busy with school." Her mother studied her face for a long moment. Then she smiled and kissed her forehead. "Whatever is going on," she said, "I want you to know that your father and I are proud of you. No matter what. You are our greatest blessing, Lena. Don't ever forget that." Lena hugged her mother tightly and closed her eyes. 2 more days. 2 more days until she walked onto that stage. 2 more days until she sat down at that piano in front of hundreds of people. 2 more days until she showed them all who she really was. She wasn't scared anymore. The fear had burned away, replaced by something stronger, something unbreakable. She was ready, And soon, everyone else would know it too. The morning of the talent show, Lena woke up with knots in her stomach. She lay in bed for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling, listening to her own heartbeat. Today was the day. After all the practice, all the tears, all the sleepless nights, it was finally here. She got up slowly and walked to the bathroom. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. There were dark circles under her eyes from weeks of late nights. Her hair was messy and tangled. She looked tired, but there was something else in her eyes, too. Something that hadn't been there before. Determination. She washed her face, brushed her teeth, and went to the kitchen. Her mother was already there, standing by the stove making breakfast. When she saw Lena, her face lit up with a warm smile. "Good morning, my love," she said. "Sit down. I made your favorite." Lena sat at the small table and watched her mother put a plate of eggs and rice in front of her. She tried to eat, but her stomach was too nervous. She managed a few bites before pushing the plate away. Her mother noticed, but didn't say anything. She just sat down across from her and took her hand. "Lena," she said softly, "I know something has been going on with you. Something you haven't told us." Lena's heart stopped. She opened her mouth to explain, to make up another excuse, but her mother held up her hand. "You don't have to tell me," she said, "but I want you to know that whatever it is, I believe in you. Your father believes in you. We always have." Lena felt tears sting her eyes. She wanted so badly to tell her mother everything, but she was scared. Scared that if she said it out loud, it would become too real. Scared that she would disappoint them. "There's something I need to show you," her mother said. She stood up and walked to the small closet near the front door. She reached inside and pulled out something wrapped in tissue paper. When she unwrapped it, Lena gasped. It was a dress. A beautiful white dress with delicate lace around the edges. It was simple, but elegant. The kind of dress Lena had only ever seen in store windows. The kind she knew they could never afford. "Mama," Lena whispered, "where did you get this?" Her mother smiled, but there was something sad in her eyes. "I made it," she said. "I've been working on it for the past 2 weeks. Every night after you went to bed." Lena couldn't speak. She just stared at the dress, her hands trembling. "I don't know what you're doing tonight," her mother continued, "but I had a feeling you might need something special to wear." She held out the dress, and Lena took it gently, like it was made of glass. The fabric was soft against her fingers. She could see the tiny, careful stitches her mother had sewn by hand. Every stitch was an act of love. "Thank you, Mama," Lena said, her voice breaking. "Thank you so much." Her mother pulled her into a tight hug and kissed the top of her head. "Go show them who you are," she whispered. That evening, Lena put on the white dress and looked at herself in the mirror. She looked different, older somehow, stronger. She took a deep breath and walked out of her room. Her father was waiting by the front door. He was still wearing his work uniform because he had come straight from his shift at the hospital. When he saw her, his eyes went wide. For a moment, he didn't say anything. He just looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "Just like your mother." Lena hugged him tightly. She could smell the cleaning chemicals on his clothes. The same smell that had been part of her life for as long as she could remember. She didn't care. He was here. That was all that mattered. The three of them walked to the school together. When they arrived, the parking lot was already full. Cars lined the streets. Families streamed toward the front entrance. The auditorium was going to be packed. Lena's parents went inside to find seats. She walked around to the side entrance where the performers were supposed to gather. Her legs felt weak, her hands were shaking. But she kept walking. Backstage was chaos. Students were running around in costumes, practicing dance moves, warming up their voices. A teacher was yelling something about the order of performances. Someone dropped a microphone, and there was a loud squeal of feedback. Lena found a quiet corner and sat down on a folding chair. She closed her eyes and tried to calm her breathing. She thought about the church basement. She thought about the old piano. She thought about Mr. Garcia's kind words. She thought about her mother's hands stitching that beautiful white dress in the dim light of their tiny apartment. She could do this. She had to do this. A few minutes later, Mrs. Thornton walked backstage with a clipboard in her hand. She was calling out the order of performers. Lena listened carefully, waiting to hear her name. It never came. One by one, Mrs. Thornton listed every performer. Singers, dancers, a comedy act, a magic show. She mentioned all of them by name, but not Lena. Finally, at the very end, almost as an afterthought, she added, "And last, we have Lena." She didn't say her last name. She didn't say what she was performing. She just said it like it was a mistake she had to acknowledge. Lena understood. Mrs. Thornton had put her last on purpose. She was hoping most of the audience would leave before Lena even got on stage. She was hoping to minimize the embarrassment, but Lena didn't care. Let her be last. Let the whole world watch her fail. She knew something they didn't. The show began. One act after another took the stage. A girl sang a pop song and got big applause. A group of boys performed a hip-hop dance routine that got everyone cheering. A kid did magic tricks that made the audience laugh and clap. Lena watched from the side of the stage, hidden in the shadows. With each act, her heart beat faster. The clock was ticking. Her moment was coming. An hour passed, then another. The crowd started to thin out a little. Some families left after their children performed. Mrs. Thornton looked pleased. Then, finally, it was time. The announcer stepped up to the microphone. "And now," he said, "our final performer of the evening. Please welcome Lena." There was no applause, just silence. A few people in the audience whispered to each other. Someone laughed. Lena stood up. Her legs felt like jelly. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She walked toward the stage, toward the bright lights, toward the hundreds of faces staring at her. She heard someone in the crowd say, "Who is that?" Someone else answered, "I don't know. Never seen her before." She climbed the stairs. The spotlight hit her face, and for a moment, she couldn't see anything. Just blinding white light. She blinked, and slowly the auditorium came into focus. It was full. Despite the late hour, despite everything, it was still nearly full. Hundreds of people, teachers, parents, students, all of them looking at her. In the front row, she saw her mother and father. Her mother was clutching her hands together, her eyes shining with tears. Her father was sitting up straight, watching her with pride in his eyes, even though he had no idea what she was about to do. Near the side of the stage, she saw Mrs. Thornton standing with her arms crossed, a smug smile on her face. Next to her, a few students were already giggling, waiting for the disaster. Lena walked across the stage to the grand piano. It was beautiful, black, and shining under the lights, nothing like the old broken piano in the church basement. She sat down on the bench. The leather was cold against her legs. She placed her hands on the keys. They were smooth, perfect. The room went quiet. Everyone was watching. Everyone was waiting. Lena closed her eyes. She took one last deep breath. And then she began to play. The first note floated through the auditorium like a whisper. Soft, gentle, almost fragile. A few people in the crowd shifted in their seats, unsure what they were hearing. Someone coughed. A child asked their parent when they could go home. But then came the second note, and the third, and the fourth. Lena's fingers moved across the keys like they had a life of their own. The melody began to build, slowly at first, then faster. The soft whisper grew into something bigger, something deeper, something that demanded attention. The whispers in the audience stopped. The giggling stopped. One by one, every single person in that auditorium went silent. Lena didn't see any of it. Her eyes were closed. She wasn't in the school auditorium anymore. She was back in the church basement, alone with the old piano, playing for no one but herself. She was in her own world, a world made entirely of music. The piece she was playing told a story. It started with sadness, a lonely melody that seemed to ache with longing. Then it shifted, building into something more powerful. The notes came faster now, tumbling over each other like a waterfall. Her fingers flew across the keys with impossible speed, hitting every note perfectly, never missing a beat. In the front row, Lena's mother pressed her hand over her mouth. Tears were streaming down her face. She had never heard her daughter play before. She had no idea. No idea at all. Next to her, Lena's father sat completely still. His eyes were wide, his lips slightly parted. He was still wearing his worn work uniform, the one that smelled like cleaning chemicals. But in that moment, he wasn't a janitor. He was just a father, watching his little girl do something extraordinary. The music grew louder, more intense. Lena's whole body moved with the melody, swaying gently as her hands danced across the piano. The sound filled every corner of the room. It bounced off the walls. It wrapped around every person in the audience and held them tight. Near the side of the stage, Mrs. Thornton stood frozen. The smug smile had vanished from her face. Her clipboard hung loosely at her side, forgotten. She stared at Lena like she was seeing a ghost. This couldn't be happening. This was the quiet girl. The poor girl. The girl who had never taken a lesson. The girl she had dismissed and ignored and laughed about with other teachers. But there she was, playing one of the most difficult pieces ever written, playing it like she had been born to do it. The middle section of the piece was the hardest. It required fingers to move faster than seemed humanly possible. It required perfect control, perfect timing, perfect emotion. Professional pianists spent years mastering this section. Some never got it right. Lena played it flawlessly. Her fingers were a blur. The notes crashed through the auditorium like thunder. People in the audience leaned forward in their seats, their mouths open, unable to believe what they were witnessing. A woman in the third row started crying. A man near the back shook his head slowly, whispering to himself, "How is this possible?" Then came the final section. The music softened again, returning to that lonely, aching melody from the beginning. But this time, there was something different, something hopeful. The sadness was still there, but it was mixed with strength, with triumph, with the sound of someone who had been through darkness and come out the other side. Lena played the last few measures with her eyes still closed. Her fingers pressed the final chord, and she held it there, letting the sound ring out across the silent room. Then she lifted her hands from the keys. For a moment there was nothing. Complete silence. Not a cough, not a whisper, not a single sound. Lena opened her eyes. She looked out at the audience, suddenly terrified. Had she made a mistake? Had she failed? Why wasn't anyone clapping? Then a single person stood up. It was her father. He rose from his seat in the front row, his eyes wet with tears, and he started clapping, slowly at first, then harder. Her mother stood up next, then the person behind them, then another, and another. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was on its feet. 500 people, all standing, all clapping, all cheering. The sound was deafening. It washed over Lena like a wave, so powerful she almost couldn't breathe. People were shouting, whistling, some were crying openly, not even bothering to wipe their tears. The applause went on, echoing off the walls, shaking the floor beneath her feet. Lena sat at the piano, completely overwhelmed. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know what to say. She just sat there, tears rolling down her cheeks, her hands trembling in her lap. In the crowd, she saw students who had laughed at her. They weren't laughing now. They were standing with everyone else, clapping, their faces filled with shock and something that looked like shame. She saw the girl who had taped that cruel note to her locker. The girl was crying. She saw Mrs. Thornton, still standing near the side of the stage. The teacher's face was pale. She wasn't clapping. She just stood there, staring at Lena with an expression that was impossible to read. Maybe it was regret. Maybe it was disbelief. Maybe it was the realization that she had been completely, terribly wrong. The applause finally began to fade. People started sitting back down, but the energy in the room had changed. Everyone was buzzing, whispering to each other, pointing at the girl in the white dress who was still sitting at the piano. The announcer came back on stage looking almost as stunned as everyone else. He cleared his throat and said into the microphone, "Well, I think we can all agree that was something special." The crowd erupted in cheers again. That night, someone in the audience posted a video of Lena's performance online. By morning, it had 10,000 views. By the end of the week, it had 1 million. By the end of the month, it had been seen by over 20 million people around the world. News stations picked up the story, the quiet girl who taught herself piano in a church basement, the girl who was mocked and dismissed, the girl who proved everyone wrong. Lena received letters from music schools across the country. Scholarship offers poured in. One of the most famous music conservatories in America offered her a full ride, covering everything. Tuition, housing, all of it. She wouldn't have to pay a single dollar. Her parents cried when they found out. Her father held the letter in his rough, worn hands and read it over and over again, like he couldn't believe the words were real. At school, everything changed. Students who had never spoken to her suddenly wanted to be her friend. Teachers who had ignored her now smiled and said hello in the hallways. Even Mrs. Thornton approached her one day after class, her voice quiet and stiff. "I was wrong about you," she said. "I'm sorry." Lena looked at her for a long moment. Part of her wanted to be angry. Part of her wanted to say all the things she had kept inside for so long. But she didn't. "Thank you," she said simply, and she walked away. Because Lena had learned something important. Revenge wasn't the answer. Anger wasn't the answer. The best response to people who doubted you was simply to become the person they said you could never be. Years later, Lena would perform on stages around the world. Concert halls in Paris, theaters in Tokyo, sold-out shows in New York City. She would win awards and be called one of the greatest pianists of her generation. But she never forgot where she came from. She never forgot the old piano in the church basement. She never forgot Mr. Garcia, who let her play in peace. She never forgot her mother's handmade white dress or her father's tears in the front row. And whenever someone asked her how she did it, how she went from being a nobody to becoming a star, she always gave the same answer. "They told me I couldn't," she said, "so I showed them I could." That was the story of Lena. The girl who was laughed at, the girl who was invisible, the girl who sat down at a piano one night and left the whole world speechless. Some people are born to prove the doubters wrong. She was one of them.